Like the rain is easing up a little bit. In fact, in some parts, the sun's out, so that's definitely a good sign. First Alert meteorologist Erika Paige joins us now with the second half of this story, I guess.
Yeah, it's been a little rough the last 24 hours or so, but now we have to talk about the heat that's going to be on the way. It doesn't necessarily feel like it out there this evening, though I will say I think the sunshine has been a bright spot after all those storms that we had over the last 12 to 24 hours. Now that this rain is starting to clear out of here, we should really start to transition towards a very quiet evening. You look at Doppler radar, really all we have left is just a little bit of that cloud cover for areas largely along and just east of I-77, and that will continue to thin out over the next couple of hours as well. But when you expand the picture and you start to add in some of the temperatures here, you see what's on the way. I mean, you look out towards Rapid City, South Dakota, they're checking in at 99 degrees at this hour. So that's the heat that's building into the central parts of the country, and that's eventually going to be headed our direction. But we're still under what we would generally call this troughing, or it allows us to see some of those slightly cooler temperatures, which is why, for the most part, we've been able to hold on to largely the mid to upper 60s so far this evening. I don't think we're going to get much warmer than this over the next couple of hours. In fact, we should trend just a little bit cooler here as we approach midnight and enjoy this. If you want to give your air conditioning a little bit of a break, tonight is going to be the night to do that. Yes, we still may have a little bit of that humidity out there, but it will be nothing like what we're going to see over the next couple of days. I think for a lot of us, most of us will wake up upper 50s to about lower 60s for tomorrow, and then we are headed for a day back about low to mid 80s once we get into the afternoon. And you'll see it's just a very steady climb in that temperature with a few more clouds during the second half of the day, and that may prompt an isolated shower or storm before the heat really starts to build in this weekend. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about how many 90-degree days we're going to be tracking coming up in your First Alert forecast.
All right, we got to start preparing for the heat that's coming. If I'm hearing this right, if I'm paying attention, Erika Paige, 3 days or more makes it a heat wave if it's 90 degrees or higher. Is that right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to come in full force really once we get into the weekend. So we want to prepare folks for the fact that, you know, spending a lot of this time outside, especially once you hit Sunday, honestly, even Saturday, but Saturday, technically your temperature won't be quite at 90 degrees. It's going to probably make it a little bit harder to spend a lot of that time outside. You're going to feel the heat exhaustion likely just kind of starting to settle in if you're not taking the necessary precautions to take those frequent breaks, wear the light colored clothing so you can reflect as much of that heat away from your body, and certainly drinking a lot of water to keep your body hydrated to kind of make up for some of the sweating, which is your body's natural process to try and keep it a little bit cooler. So we do have 319 First Alert weather days. The first one begins on Sunday. It is going to be extremely humid, especially by the second half of the weekend. If you thought the last couple of days were humid, honestly, that's nothing like what we're going to see headed into this weekend. Think of more if you go down to the Gulf Coast or even the south parts of the country, when you get that really deep tropical moisture, that's what it's going to be feeling like. And we're going to pair it with some of those 90-degree temperatures, which means that your heat index values, both Sunday as well as Monday, could easily be in that 95 to 100 degree plus territory. We may get a little bit of relief once we get into Tuesday afternoon, but that would only be because we add a few more clouds in during the afternoon and we potentially open up the door to a couple showers and storms. If that happens, your heat index values may drop a little bit closer to the mid 90s, but I mean, it's still going to be pretty toasty out there. Late tomorrow afternoon, this is really just kind of the start of the heat working back in, but honestly, these are very seasonable temperatures for us for this time of the year. Expect highs pretty much area wide, about low to mid 80s across our area. If you need to get some yard work done after all these storms have come through, I highly suggest taking advantage of the cooler air, relatively speaking, in place tomorrow. We'll have a little less humidity. Yes, there may be a late day shower, but I don't think that that's going to impact everybody. Should be pretty isolated. And then if you need to get some of this stuff done during the weekend, I would really strongly encourage you to do that first thing Saturday morning, because the later you get into the day, the more the heat's going to start to become a bit more apparent and the more that humidity starts to climb. And honestly, I would avoid some of the strenuous activities once you get into the second half of the weekend. So when you factor in that humidity, what is that going to do to your heat index value? For a lot of us, it's going to put us, like we've said, in that mid 90 to potentially triple digit category, which means things like heat stroke, if you're cramping, if you've got heat exhaustion and you're presenting with some of those signs and symptoms, You really want to make sure you're taking those necessary precautions to cool off your body, make sure it's staying hydrated, and honestly just avoiding the peak heat of the day, that 10 a.m. to about 4 p.m. window during the afternoon where the sun is the most intense and the heat is the most intense as well. Because here's the thing, overnights not going to give you a lot of relief from that heat with overnight lows expected into the mid 70s. Your best bet is to hold off until the later part of the week once we can start adding in some shower and storm chances. We'll talk a lot more about this